Okay, this video will be kind of a practice slash application video for using, number one, for using notation for rhythm and remembering how time signatures work, remembering how note values work, remembering how the takadimi syllables work, and how we can actually use those to create rhythms. And learn rhythms and etc. Okay. So review of what a time signature here. Here's our basic common time signature, 4/4 time, and this whether this is 4/4 or 6/8 or 17/16 or 12/32, whatever. It doesn't matter what the time signature is. The top number and bottom number always mean the same things. The top number means this. Top number tells you the number of notes per measure / bar. A measure and a bar is the same thing. In music, we're referring to a measure. That's the same thing as referring to a bar of music. So what this top number is telling us for 4/4 is that there are 4 notes of a certain note value in each measure of music, and that does not change until the time signature changes in the music, and that can change also. The bottom number will always tell you, or will always refer to the denominator of the note value fraction, which each measure is being measured by, basically. So 4, if you imagine it being a denominator of a fraction, that would be a quarter, 1/4. So that 4 refers to a quarter note. If this is 6/8 time, then that is 6/8 notes in each measure. If that's 12/4, that's 12 quarter notes in each measure. If it's 7/64, that's 7/64 notes in each measure, etc. 4/4, 4 quarter notes. Time signature has less to do with beats, actually. This is something that people kind of don't really understand very well. What determines, just think about 4/4 actually for just a second. What determines how many beats are in 4/4? There's nothing in the time signature that actually tells us. Other than that, it only tells us that there's 4 quarter notes in each measure. How is each measure of music going to feel? And is there another time signature which the composer could use that might make it easier to write? That's the thing about time signatures. It doesn't actually have anything to do with beats. It doesn't have anything to do with how the music feels. That is determined by culture. Think about 3/4 time. 3/4 is commonly referred to as the waltz time signature. And whenever you're using 3/4 time, a lot of times it's hard to make it not feel like a waltz. If, there's other things about a waltz that makes a waltz a waltz. Like the emphasized first beat and the pattern of the bass notes and other things like that. It's not all about the time signature. And that's part of the point. You could, there's nothing telling you can't use 6/8 to write a waltz or 9/8 to write a waltz. Just because one is simple and one is compound. It doesn't really matter. It would be pretty hard to use 4/4 to write a waltz. Now, why would that be? Well, the waltz kind of is defined by the 3-beat structure, and the da 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 down up down up kind of movement in the bass of the accompaniment of the chords, and the way that the melodies flow, da 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 da, whatever, just making up a random melody that sounds like a waltz. You can do it pretty easily if you know how a waltz feels. It's got that feel to it. It's got that 3-beat feel to it. And that's because it's a dance, and you want to be able to dance to it easily. Think about if you're trying to write a waltz in 4/4 time. You would have, well, the main problem as a composer, not even thinking about as a dancer or as a performer or as anybody who's feeling the music, think about as a composer trying to use 4/4 time to write a waltz, where the waltz is determined by the 3-beat structure. How are you going to divide 4/4 time up into 3 equal parts? Not really a good way to do that, I don't think. It's basically, the point is that it'd be pretty hard to use 4/4 to write a waltz, which is so dependent on the 3-beat structure, the 3 beats of the waltz feeling, the waltz bass, the waltz melody. Could you do it? Yeah, you could do it, and the people who are performing the waltz might actually have a really hard time reading the music, because every measure, well, the first measure of the music, there's going to be an extra note probably. You're probably going to be using quarter notes as your beat. But you're going to have an extra one, and that's going to be the first beat of the next group of 3 for the 3-beat structure. And then the next measure is going to have 2 extra beats. And then the next one after that is going to have an extra beat as well, belonging to two different groups of 3 within the waltz structure. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but the point I want to make is that a time signature is not a definitive thing. Time signature doesn't tell you about beats. It doesn't tell you about how the music feels. It doesn't tell you anything but this: how many notes are in each measure, and what kind of note is that, right? So 4 quarter notes. What's the easiest way to use 4 quarter notes? Is, well, it's for it to be 4 beats and for the beat to be on the quarter note. If you wanted there to be 8 beats in a measure of music, you could use 4/4. You could use 8/4. You could use 16/4, whatever. But what changes is what note gets the beat, what note is the composer trying to emphasize in the music so that the beat is felt in a group of 4, or whatever they want it to be. Another kind of random example, maybe not random actually, think of the song Money by Pink Floyd. If you know, that song is written in 7. It's got 7 beats in a measure. Da 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 da, right? It's got 7 clear beats. What time signature would you use to write that? To have 7 equal beats, you'd probably use a time signature with a top number 7, 7/4, 7/8, 7/16, whatever. And then the note value is going to be the note value that gets your beat. So you probably want to use a quarter note, since it's kind of nice middle of the road. If you want to have some extra faster subdivisions, you have plenty of room to work with. Some slower subdivisions, longer held notes, you have plenty of room to work with whole notes, dotted notes, etc. So time signature, again, nothing to do with beats. It has everything to do with how the composer writes the music, and the easiest way for the composer to write the music. And does the composer want to kind of communicate a different kind of feeling? Does he want the person who's playing this piece of music to feel the beat in 4, to feel the beat in 12, whatever? Okay, so that's all I'll say about time signature. There's a lot to think about it and a lot to kind of realize. If you want to, it's for 4/4 and for 6/8, you can kind of just ignore all of that stuff. But I kind of like to know the truth about what is actually going on in these things, in these symbols that we're using. What do they actually mean? What does it actually mean in reality? Not just what do I, what can I think that it means so that I can ignore what it actually means. I love to learn. I love learning. I love teaching. So I love to get into this kind of nitty-gritty stuff of what does this stuff actually mean. Anyway, feel free to skip this part of the video. I should probably say that at the beginning. Feel free to skip this part of the video if you don't care. But whatever. I care, so I just wanted to throw it in there. Anyway, now we are going to move on to some application, some practical application. In 4/4 and in 6/8, we'll stick to those two time signatures, and we'll write out some takadimi and see if we can come up with some rhythms, or even learn a little bit better how takadimi works. Okay, so here we have a simple bar of 4/4 time with the takadimi symbols here below. Now, with all that stuff, about how does the beat actually work in time signatures out of the way, we can kind of focus on how do we actually use takadimi to break up beats, to count beats. And actually, speaking of counting beats, why don't I just go ahead and count the beats. So, 4/4 time, we have 4 quarter notes in every measure. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4 quarter notes, right? So we can probably assume that this is one single measure of 4/4 time. And we can, because it is. Now, for takadimi, we use ta to mark the downbeats, to mark each new beat in the measure. Okay? Now we're going to start to manipulate these beats a little bit, these notes. We're going to change their value, and we are going to see how takadimi changes and how that changes in relation to the number of beats. Even though this is 4/4 time, remember, this is still 4/4 time this entire time. Okay, so now let's do this. Let's connect these beats together with a beam. Now we have eighth notes. There's only 2 of them because 2 eighth notes go into 1 quarter note. We have to have 4 quarter notes in each bar, so this is only 2 of those quarter notes equivalent. This is only 2 beats, 1, 2. And the beat is still ta, ta. And that's the downbeat, if you will, or a downstroke on the guitar. You would use a downstroke to play a downbeat. Okay, so what do we do for these second halves, the upbeats? Well, the syllable that we use is D. Or if you're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. All right? There we go. So D is the halfway point between ta. And it's the same way in compound time when we look at that also. D is the halfway point. So in simple time, there's 2, each beat divides into 2 parts. That's what defines simple time. So here's the 2 parts of a single beat, a single quarter note, 2 eighth notes. And if you divide it in half, D is the half of ta. Okay, now let's make another adjustment. And let's just go ahead and do that. We're going to connect these again and draw another beam there. Now, these are 16th notes. There are 4 16th notes in a single quarter note. And again, you can check the math if you don't believe me. 4/16 notes equals 1/4 because you reduce these by 4. Whoops. Reduce these by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 16 divided by 4 is 4. 4/16 equals 1/4. So here we have the equivalent to 1/4 note with 4/16 notes. And we still have a halfway point between this ta and let's just go ahead and write a quarter note right here for our second beat actually. That's another ta. The halfway point between ta is D. And that's and, remember. Okay, so now we have two further subdivisions to divide each of these halves of the beat into. And this one is ka, ta, ka, di, mi. And that's one e and if you are used to counting it that way. These are just two different ways of counting beats or marking beats in some way. You can use the Takadimi system. You can use one e and I kind of prefer Takadimi actually. It's actually kind of fun to learn and to use if you get really good at it. Okay, so here is a basic quarter note in the context of 4/4 broken down into, well, we had ta, and then we broke it down to eighth notes. We got ta, di. We broke that down into 16th notes, and we get taka, di, mi. If we wanted to go to 32nd notes, there's where the limitations of takadimi kind of breaks down a little bit. You have to kind of rearrange how you do your syllables, or you just start making up random nonsense, which is something that you can definitely do. But we can see how this works now a little bit. Now let's do something else. Let's modify this so that we can start to see some other things or some other applications for using the takadimi syllables. Let's go ahead and erase this 16th note right here. Okay, now we still have a 16th here. We have 2 16ths here. We are missing ka. And why don't we just go ahead and write that in as a rest. Right, so there's a 16th rest. We have, or we could write this as an 8th note. Why don't we just do that just to keep it simple? So we'll just erase that beam, so we only have one flag for an 8th note. Okay. Right, so we have an 8th note, and we have 2 16th notes. 1/8 plus 2 16ths equals a quarter. Again, you can do the math if you don't believe me. But that means ta and ka, just like before when we just had ta and di. Now the 8th note is taking up the space of these 2 16th notes. So we only need one syllable to say them. So we just get rid of ka. Now we have ta, di, mi. Ta, di, mi, ta, di, mi, ta, di, mi, ta, di, mi, ta. And that's what that rhythm sounds like. Okay. We can do this in other ways too. Let's go ahead and put ka back in. And that's E. Let's take out D. So, well, I'm going to have to rewrite this, aren't I? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's take out D. Now we want taka, mi. So we have 2 16ths. And, well, right, so now we actually need that 16th rest right there. And this has to be a 16th note because there's not, it's only a 16th from here to this next quarter note. Mi is always the fourth of the 4 16th notes, if that makes sense. Ta is always the first, ka is always the second, di is always the half, which would be the third if you broke it down to 16ths. And mi is always the 4th 16th note. So we have to have another one here. Let's go ahead and write that. And we'll just write it with 2 flags like that. Okay? Now we have taka, mi ta, 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 taka, mi ta. Just like that. There's lots of different ways that we can do this to get rid of our kind of middle subdivisions. We could even take out ta and just have mi as well. And if we did that, it would change the note value of ta. It now has to be a dotted 8th note. And mi is still a 16th note. But ta is taking up the 3 16ths that would otherwise be ta, ka, and di. These are all 16ths by themselves. But if you want this note value here under ta to have the same value as all 3 of these combined, then you only need 1 syllable. That means, well, it's 3 notes, so it's a dotted note, and it's a dotted 8th note for ta, ta, mi ta, mi ta, mi ta, mi ta. And you could even practice like saying the middle syllables under your breath. Tak, di, mi tak, di, mi tak, di, mi tak, di, mi ta. And you can emphasize it in different ways with like an accent, or I won't draw any accents in, but whatever. You can emphasize it in different ways to practice keeping those subdivisions in your mind and in your head. But yeah, it's great. It's great. Really useful. Okay, is there anything else we want to say for 4/4 time? Well, let me just take a random group of notes and see if we can, well, let's just start with 4 quarter notes for each of the beats, maybe, or maybe not. Let's just write a random number of notes here, and we'll turn them into groups of notes in just a second. Okay, so there we go. Just in the random way that I wrote that, I wish I spaced it a little bit better. Actually, I can. Let me just bring this one a little bit closer. It will be a little bit more, we can do a little bit more with this, is what I mean to say. Okay. Let's say, let's say that this first note right here is not the downbeat of the first beat. Let's say our first beat is off over here to the side, just because that's how I wrote it. So there's 1. Actually, I better write that a little bit smaller. So here's our first beat. Let's make this note our second beat. And that'll be a ta when we get to it. Let's make this our third beat right here, all the way over here. And we'll just have this be our 4th beat as well. Okay. So we can see right here, the first beat, there's not actually a note happening there. We need that to be a rest. Let's make it a, well, it has to be less than a quarter rest because our second beat starts here and there's another note in between. Let's just make it an 8th rest. So there's an 8th rest right there for our first beat. And since you don't speak or count rests, we will not write a takadimi syllable for it. Let's say this is then the halfway point, because it would actually kind of have to be. That would have to be an 8th note. So that's 1 and, or D for this note here. This is a downbeat, so it has to be ta. And let's see, here's our third beat over here. Let's go ahead and mark that as ta, and here as ta as well. Okay, so we've got 2 extra notes in here in the middle that we can deal with. There's lots of different ways that we can divide those up. For instance, we could just make it a triplet, which would be kind of like this 2 and, or ta, ki, da. That is something we'll come to with 6/8 time in just a little bit. We're not going to do that right now, but that's a possibility of what we could do with this group of 3 notes right here. Let's just say that it's ta, di, and mi, like that. So di is and, mi is okay? So how do we connect these notes up here so that they're not quarter notes anymore? Well, we'll just draw a beam across for the start. Let me actually clean that up a little bit and connect that there. There we go. Oh man, gotta go all the way, don't I? There we go. Okay. I'll stop there. So, ta to D is an 8th note. Because 4/4 time, again, thinking about all these things, 4/4 time, we are trying to make a group of 3 notes equal to a quarter note in some way. So the value of these 3 notes has to equal a quarter note. Since this is D, the upbeat, that means that ta is covering over ta and ka, which is the first 2 16ths in the takadimi pattern. So this is a 8th note right here. D and mi are the 2 16ths on the upbeat. So these are now 16ths. We draw a beam right there. And here is our bar 4/4 time with the number counting method and the takadimi method here. So if we were going to try and count this, 1, 2, 3, 4, di, ta, di, mi, ta, ta. Di, ta, di, mi, ta, ta. That's the pattern. If I can snap along to it. 3, 4. Di, ta, di, mi, ta, ta. Di, ta, di, mi, ta, ta. There's a million ways that you could do this. And a million reasons why you might want to as well. Just for practice, just for fun. If you're kind of sick of Sudoku puzzles, you could play around with takadimi and create rhythms, some rhythm puzzles for yourself to solve. Let's go now to 6/8 time and see how the takadimi, sorry, I said solfege, the takadimi syllables. Let's see how those work in 6/8 time, compound time. Now there's a few differences in how the syllables work for compound time versus simple time. And remember again, in simple time, the beat divides into 2 parts. In compound time, the beat divides into 3 parts. 6/8 is a compound time signature. So each of the beats in your compound time signature need to divide into 3 parts. Which means we need dotted notes to be our beat value. Another reason why it's just a terrible reason to learn the time signatures as the bottom number telling you how many beats there are is because it's just wrong. It just isn't true. The beat in 6/8 is a dotted quarter note. There's only 2 beats. It's a compound duple time signature. Look it up if you don't believe me. There's not 8 beats in a bar of 6/8. There's not 3 beats in a bar of 6/8 because somebody told you when you were learning piano that a quarter note is a beat. It's not. A quarter note is just a quarter note. It's just a fraction. How you use that fraction, there's lots of different ways that you can use a quarter note in music. It's not just going to be a beat. Case in point, 6/8 time. we could easily have 3 quarter notes in 6/8, just to kind of go off the rails a little bit. We could easily have 3 quarter notes because each of these quarter notes breaks down into 2 eighth notes each, and 2 times 3 is 6. There's our 6 eighth notes, right? So this is the same as 3/4 in its value, but it's not the same beats, and that's what I was trying to get at in the first part of this video with, the long-winded explanation of time signatures, how they're actually used, and what it actually means for a time signature to tell you what it tells you. All this tells us is that there are 6 eighth notes in each measure. So each measure has to have a value of 6 eighths. 6 eighths the fraction. And the easiest way for a composer to break that up is by using 2 dotted quarter notes as the beat. Because 3/4 already has 3 beats. So we don't need another time signature for a 3-beat measure. We already have 3/4 for it. We could use 6/8 for something else, and that's why simple and compound are different from each other again, right? Okay, so the beat in, let me actually write these in again. We have 2 beats in 6/8, and the beat is always, again, ta. Now, if we wanted to break these up into the first subdivision, they break up into 3 eighth notes each. And let's see, I'll just write those here like this for each of them, and beam them across. And the beams for eighth notes and 16th notes, any note that has a beam will always connect to the notes that are shared in its beat, if it's properly written. And I've seen pieces of music and read pieces of music where this rule is not followed, and it's just breaking a rule. It's bad grammar, it's bad spelling. It's the same kind of thing in English class. If you mess up in English class, if we connected these 6 eighth notes together like this, then it's not really clear anymore that we have 2 beats. It's not really clear if we have 2 beats or 3 beats or 6 beats or something else. So when we are writing 6/8, we want to make sure, or any time signature, you want to make sure that you are preserving the visual cue of where the beat is. So 3 eighths equals a dotted quarter note. A dotted quarter note is our beat. Therefore, we beam 3 eighth notes together and no more. Okay. Now, what do we call these other subdivisions? I said that D is the halfway point in both simple and compound time signature, and that's actually exactly the same in compound as it is in simple. But here we don't have an upbeat anymore. We have a kind of a middle and a back half of the beat. It has 3 parts. There's no middle of that between these 2 downbeats, right? The middle is between these 2 notes right here. So we don't have D in our first subdivision. We'll get to that. We have ta, ki, da. Ta, ki, da. 1 and 2 and 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. You can hear each downbeat, 1 and 2, gets an emphasis. 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. And that's down to tradition. That's how we traditionally do it in 6/8 time. And there's a correlation there with how 3/4 works in a waltz, for instance. 1 2 3 2 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Sorry, not 1 2 3 2 2 3. There's only 3 beats. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 ta 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 ta. That's 3/4. 6/8 is takida 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 takida. You can see why there could be some confusion in how time signatures are actually working here. Time signature is just doing a job. How we divide the value of this measure up depends partially on the time signature, but how we want to use that time signature and how it's been used traditionally over the last hundreds of years in Western music history. Anyway, here is our first subdivision, takida, 1 and a. Now, if we actually are going to beam these together now, and we're going to add another beam to create 16th notes. Now, 6 16th notes is the same as 1 dotted quarter note. So we are going to rearrange here a little bit. Ta is still our downbeat. We still have ki and da. Ki is here. Da is here. And remember, that's 1 and a. So we have now 3 more notes to assign new syllables to. This one right here is va. After ki is D. There's D. And this is the halfway point between ta and the next ta over here in the second beat. Right, the D is just the halfway point, and it's exactly the same as simple time. If you wanted to cross over simple and compound time, you would use the ta and D syllables to do that. The last one is tava ki di da ma, ma. Let's do what we did with simple time before. Now let's break up this second subdivision, the 16th note in 6/8, and let's see how the solfege matches up to it. And why don't we just go ahead and erase the solfege right away too. So if we wanted to, well, let's just go ahead and put ta back where it is. Ta is there. Let's say we get rid of these 2 notes right here. What does that do? Those are 16th notes. So that is going to turn this into a dotted 8th note. Right there. Dotted 8th note equals 3 16th notes. Now, within 6/8 time, this is still only 1 beat, but it looks like 2 beats almost. It's almost like you're dividing, kind of playing around with your polyrhythms again, where we're kind of combining concepts of simple time and compound time together. So ta is here, but va and ki are gone. Now we have D is our next one, and dama also here as well. So ta, di dama ta, di dama ta, di dama ta, like that. Ta, ki, dama ta, ki, dama ta, ki, dama ta, di dama ta. Yeah, I'm having trouble speaking it right now. I've been talking for a couple hours at this point, making these videos anyway. Right, so if we wanted to do this, we could do this lots of different ways again. Actually, I don't think I'll do it again as long as I did in the simple time, just because my voice is kind of going a little bit right now. So let's jump straight to writing a random patch of notes and see what we can come up with. Let's have, I'll just go kind of evenly spaced until I run out of space and see. Well, that gives me 6, actually. Cool. Let's see what we can do with this other than just writing 6 eighth notes here. Let's make this first one a quarter note, and let's have, well, if this is a quarter note, we still have another eighth note left in this beat, or the value of an eighth. Let's make this 2/16 notes together. There is our first beat, which means this has to be the start of our second beat, and that's ta, dama. Ta, dama, ta. And that's what we have here. Here's our next ta. And let's make this make it an eighth note. Okay. So now we have 2 more eighth notes left to play with. Actually, that kind of seals the deal. That means that all 3 of these are going to be eighth notes, because they have to be. And that leaves us with ta, ki, da. Ta, damataki da ta, damataki da ta, damataki da ta. And that's what this measure would be written as. Again, lots and lots and lots of different ways that you can do this, practice this. Again, it's kind of like a Sudoku puzzle. You can create your own fun with it, I guess. Or if you don't want to go through the bother, if you just want to practice your rhythm, go to YouTube and search up a rhythm exercise. I think in the solfege video, I actually linked a rhythm exercise video that's just up on YouTube for free, and it just goes and has something like this and has you do something, clap or tap or snap or use takademi or some other syllable system. There's lots. Just to go along with the video and practice your rhythm in that way. It's lots of different ways that you can do this. And just like the major scales video, this one is turning out to be about an hour long, so I want to end this here. I don't think I have anything else to say about it. But yeah, the applications for this are endless, and if you're practicing scales, you can break your scales up into a pattern, into a measure pattern, and practice your scales in a particular rhythm. You can practice strumming patterns on the guitar with a particular rhythm, so on and so forth. If you're a singer and you're trying to figure out how to sing a particular melody of a particular song. Anyway, I am going to end this video here.